Hi, I'm Claire Williamson, an ex-litigator and the co-founder of Leading Minds. With 97% of lawyers complaining that stress is impacting their health, I think that it's time we speak about how challenging the pressures of the legal industry can be. So this podcast is a space where lawyers can discuss how they've overcome the challenges they face in their role and gone on to thrive within their career. Whether you're a trainee, a partner, or anyone in between, I really hope that this podcast will leave you feeling inspired, empowered, and with the confidence that you can leave your mark on the legal industry. And today I'm very excited to be joined by James Klein, who's the head of corporate and technology at Shoosmiths. And James is going to be sharing his journey from trainee to head of department at a UK law firm, and also giving us an insight into the life of a corporate lawyer. So thank you so much for joining me today, James.
Pleasure. Nice to be here.
Great. I thought it might be good initially just to really hear about your kind of entry into the legal industry and where you started and how you kind of ended up where you are today.
Thank you. Well, it's been quite a journey, which hopefully hasn't quite finished yet, but it started off at DLA Piper. And back in the early days of being a paralegal, I was pretty convinced that I wanted to be a contentious lawyer. And how things changed, I guess, for me. I had been involved at an early stage with a number of tasks in the litigation team and also the employment team. And I realised quite early on, in particular, at the end of a very long period working on discovery and disclosure for a big litigation case, that when that matter got settled on the court steps, and I'd spent 3 or 4 months working round the clock trying to prepare on that case, that actually litigation might not be the best thing for me. Whilst the client was very, very happy with the result at the time, I kind of viewed the 3 or 4 months rather differently in a period at which I'd been working very, very hard and actually didn't really see the fruits of my labour, if you like, and I felt it had been wasted time on the basis that the parties had settled. And so I started to really consider whether it was the right area of law for me. And I started to look at contentious versus non-contentious and also transactional work. And I think it became very clear to me early on that actually I wanted to follow a route through the law where I could actually see the fruits of my labour, work on a transaction, complete it, actually make some difference for a client, and then move on to, if you like, the next transaction. So I kind of realised that very, very on even before I qualified, actually.
Okay, that's really interesting to hear. And did you find that it was quite easy to kind of then shape yourself into that kind of department? Because I know that many trainees are very concerned about, that if they've got a real passion for one area, that's obviously can be a huge positive because it means that they can, kind of really immerse themselves in that. But there's also a concern as well about pigeonholing themselves as well. So was that ever a kind of concern for you, or do you think it should be a concern for people to really get so set on one way being the way that they kind of want to go?
I think a lot of people do think these days that they know what they want to do. I think one of the travesties, if you like, or sort of hurdles for individuals coming into the profession these days is not really understanding what the department is all about. And I think I was quite lucky, again, thinking back to my training days at DLA, where partners and associates at the time actually sat down with me to tell me how corporate transactions worked. And I think this had a big bearing on me actually joining corporate and qualifying into DLA's corporate team in September 98, was that I actually knew the purpose of the tasks that I were carrying out, if you like. I understood the basics of a transaction. I did a lot of pre-reading before I joined the group. I understood the discrete tasks that I was given, the importance that they had within the transaction, and importantly, I was able to see, well, there was a bit of luck involved here, I suppose, but I was able to see transactions through from the start to the finish. And I think a lot of people, even these days, perform discrete tasks on transactions or within their disciplines, and they don't really know the importance or understand why they're carrying out, and it can lead to a lot of frustration for people. And a lot of it, I think, is down to chemistry and relationships and the people within the group, in terms of being able to build up a good working relationship and feeling like you want to work with those people in that group. But there's definitely people who feel like they're pigeonholed these days, and that there's so many factors around that, including how many places are available in a particular office or in a particular practice area, and that has a big impact, I guess, on people and what they might choose. We've recently seen a number of people who've wanted to qualify into corporate. Again, I'm familiar with the area because that's my area, and I know these people have applied for the area, and they've made it very clear if they don't get a position within corporate, then they will, leave the firm and they'll go and find that position elsewhere. And that's great. I mean, you don't want people just choosing an area of law because there happens to be a job there. You want people to be enthused and passionate about what they do and have a particular skill set. So it is very different these days. I think it is quite difficult. I think there is an onus on the senior people within the team to explain the role and how people can progress within that team to ensure they make the right choice. But I do think people can get pigeonholed quite early on, and a lot of it is down to whether they feel they're going to get a job in that particular department or not.
Yeah, and there's so many questions I have on that, and I think that's really interesting that you said about people often feeling like they're kind of doing the discrete task, and that was very much my experience. I went into a corporate seat as my fourth seat, and by then it was quite close to deciding what you were going to kind of do and everything, and I definitely had that area that I had kind of discrete tasks, and I wouldn't say, after speaking to you last week, I was like, oh, kind of get what it's about a little bit more, whereas at that time I did just kind of get little bits involved and it didn't really feel very conducive. In terms of if people have somewhere that they'd really like to qualify, have you got any tips for them to really help them show their willingness and their kind of their interest to partners or that department that you think would really kind of make them stand out?
Yeah, I do, and I've been at Shoosmiths for a year, just over a year and a half, and a number of people have been in touch with me from other offices, because some people want to relocate and come to London. Some people want to get a greater understanding of the types of clients in London, what we do in corporate, and offices can be very different in terms of the work that they do for particular clients. But there is no doubt that the most obvious I guess a thing that people can think about is the pre-reading, is getting in touch, understanding the client base, understanding from previous trainees or existing paralegals what the work is like. I wish I had done that. If I have, not a regret, but if I had done things differently back in 1998 in my third seat, where I'd always thought I wanted to be an employment lawyer, and I was pretty convinced I was going to be an employment lawyer. When I got that third seat in employment in London at DLA, I was absolutely over the moon, and I did no pre-reading. I had no idea the type of work that the employment team in London did in those days, and I was in the team, fortunately, as it turned out, it was quite an enlarged team that also did pensions and incentives work. So it was what they used to call an EPI team. And I quickly realized I didn't want to be an employment lawyer. It was, going back to this point about contentious versus non-contentious, it was very, it was heavily tribunal related, a lot of individual cases to look at, a lot of case law, and I quickly realized I didn't want to be an employment lawyer within the space of a few weeks. And I think if I had done some pre-reading, if I'd done some research, if I'd looked into the types of clients, I would have probably realised that I was better suited to go into perhaps a banking or a corporate seat.
Yeah.
A bit like you, Claire, I went into corporate as my fourth seat. So, I had to make a decision quite quickly into my fourth seat, which is another issue for a lot of trainees still these days, is that, that fourth seat they don't really get a huge amount of experience in that fourth seat before looking to make a decision about their future. And for me, I did do, off the back of that experience in the third seat and realizing I pushed so hard for employment and I didn't want to be an employment lawyer, I actually spent a bit of my third seat pre-reading on corporate. So that made a huge difference to me. And I went into that fourth seat quite a few rungs up the ladder, I think. I think as well, for what it's worth, I'd spent a year as a paralegal at Freshfields and DLA before I started my training contract. And, I did have a good understanding of a working environment. I understood sort of transactions. I understood what it meant for clients, but I also understood the importance of being very, very keen and being really enthusiastic about the area. And I think that's the other thing through the pre-reading that you get to understand is, do you have a real thirst for this? I'm not convinced that the courses and the disciplines that you do through your studies really prepare you for a training contract. So
Definitely.
I think the pre-reading and talking to people and understanding the types of transactions makes a huge difference before you join.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something I actually experienced as well, that I think having those kind of open conversations, not only with your supervisor or the partners, but like speaking to junior members of the team, or, developing quite a strong working relationship maybe with the trainee who sat there before you, so that you can get that insight into, the real breadth of the work rather than it being a kind of token handover. I think it's really important that, developing those relationships. I personally think what really helped me thrive within the departments that I really kind of enjoyed and I got on well with was developing those relationships with many different people within that department, rather than simply relying on my supervisor as a source of all knowledge. So I really kind of made a real effort with my secretary, and because they are the source of all knowledge, and also kind of the NQs or people that were a couple of years qualified, so that I could go and ask them questions or get a bit more insight into what it actually meant to work in that department, and I found that really useful.
Yeah, and I think I'd also add your character. I think we talked about this a little bit last week, Claire, in how you are as a person, and the type of person you are. One of the big decisions that I made as well through those early days of being in corporate was the functioning of the department. And I noticed in a very busy time that a lot of corporate partners and associate solicitors were making calls to other departments, if I can put it like that, perhaps late in the day, 5, 6 o'clock. We've got this transaction on, we need you to work for the next 2-3 hours this evening on a due diligence exercise, for instance. And I noticed how transactions were structured and conducted. And I realized quite quickly that I actually didn't want to be on the end of those calls. I wanted to be the person making them. And I think that there was a little bit of a control point for me in terms of thinking, if my day is going to be ruined on a corporate transaction, I'd rather know at the beginning of the day than at the end of the day. And so I think there's also that perception about just how work is done and how people record time and how transactions around the firm at the time were done, because it was a lot of corporate support, as is still the case in a lot of firms. And whether you're in employment or litigation or the commercial team or pensions, whatever you might be doing, there is a lot of corporate support work that goes on within law firms. And I know for myself that I made that decision, I made that choice, that I wanted to be sort of in control of my transactions and my working day. So I think some of it does go down to character as well in the decision-making process.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, I would say, like, it kind of, your story says it and my story actually says it as well, because I actually ended up qualifying into a department that wasn't necessarily my first choice, but in retrospect it was much better suited to my character and the way that I kind of operate, and yours as well, you know, being quite attached to this is what I want to do. So I think having flexibility in that's really important. What I wanted to ask you was, I know a lot of people find it quite difficult to kind of make the decision if about short-term versus long-term goals. So for example, you know, when I was kind of found out that I didn't have my first seat that I would have picked, I was really uncertain as to whether to stay or whether to then seek that out somewhere else, because it felt like a lot to like move firms, having, you know, spent 2 years kind of getting to that qualification stage. But then the other side of me was like, I'm not sure if I do stay, will I never be able to go back into that? So what I actually did was I spoke quite openly to I loved real estate. I really loved real estate litigation, but where I was, there wasn't too much real estate litigation. I qualified into litigation because they didn't actually offer a real estate seat that year. And I just went, I made it clear that I really enjoyed real estate. And if there was any work that came that way, you know, I'd love for it to come from me. So it kind of ended up working itself really, really well, because the two areas that I really liked ended up then kind of being my, I wouldn't say speciality, but it was the thing I was really passionate about. And I just wondered, is there any kind of advice that you'd give someone if they're kind of really struggling with that short-term versus long-term decision, and they maybe have a reluctance to feel like it's the right time, especially in this kind of really challenging kind of climate, to go to a different firm, but also not wanting to kind of be in a department that they're maybe not so passionate about?
I think it's a really difficult question to answer, and I think you know, we're living in a world now where things are changing almost on a, you know, certainly on a day-to-day basis rather than a month or a year-by-year basis, and it almost feels like long-term decision making is really difficult and perhaps not the best route. But I'd go back to what you said about sort of enjoying what you do, and I think there is certainly in my view, there should be a fun element to working, and to really enjoy what you do, to work with the right team, and to enjoy what you do now. And things do change. I think, as I say to a lot of trainees and paralegals, you only get one career. And, you know, I've seen people leave or move on to different things that have different short-term commitments. I've seen paralegals who have become trainees, who've become newly qualified, that have then moved to other firms, just whether it's money related, they've gone to a US firm because that's what they've wanted to do for a couple of years, because they're buying a house, or they just want to, you know, concentrate on the now. And that's absolutely fine. I think, you know, people they do only have one career. They need to make those decisions, but need to remain happy. And I just think you have to kind of work with the people that you really like. I think as long as you get enjoyment out of doing whatever you're doing. I mean, I always thought to myself, the day that I stopped getting a buzz out of completing a corporate deal, I would do something else. And I fortunately, you know, it's 20 years now, whether it's a small deal or a large deal, I still get that buzz out of a completion. And I know from that I chose the right area of law for me. Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. And I'm very lucky that I still get that buzz. It could stop tomorrow and I'd start questioning, do I want to carry on doing corporate transactions? So I think you have to kind of weigh all those things up and work out what is the best thing for you. But I just don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think you just have to make the decision based on the circumstances in front of you.
Yeah, I would also say as well, from having, ran this podcast, I think I'm on about 22, 23 episodes now we've recorded, which is a lot of people, and hearing a lot of different stories. And the one thing I always take from it is that there's so much more flexibility than I think you realize, in terms of, you know, being able to kind of take a step forward and then go, actually, I don't think that was quite right, and still being able to go back, whether that's, you know, being in a certain department or being at a certain firm or whatever it is. I think we're very stuck in the kind of mindset of you know, you do your vacation scheme, you get your traineeship, you qualify in the department, and then you work your way up to a partner. And some people do have that journey, but I think a lot more they've done a bit of paralegaling here or there, and, you know, or they've maybe moved departments and stuff like that as well. I've seen a lot of people telling me, or even having had alternative careers before entering the legal industry. I think it's really refreshing to actually hear that there isn't just one way, and you know, that you can still go on to have a really successful career despite, you know, your short-term versus long-term kind of objectives, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've seen people relocate from one office to another. They're working with different teams, but they're still working with their old teams, and they've chosen to do that, or they've asked to do that. I think there is definitely more selection now about the type of work that you do within your department. I think that is a real difference from when I was, if you like, going through the ranks. I was very much given work and processed it, and then I was given another piece of work and I processed it, etc. And I didn't really have an opportunity as a very, very young, in particular as a newly qualified, actually. I never really had any choice in the type of work that I did. And of course, there was a lot more work on, I suppose, those days. There was the volume, working very late, all those old kind of stories and myths, perhaps some myths as well, about the corporate world. But I think these days people have more choice. There are different types of transactions, so many different types of new clients now coming through, that there is an opportunity for people to be a bit more selective about the types of work and get a broader experience working in a corporate team. And a lot of it now is also sector driven. I'm lucky enough to lead our national technology sector within Shoosmiths, and I'm working with some fantastic people within the firm that are not in corporate, that are in, you know, real estate or commercial or litigation, who all want to be involved as well in helping to grow different types of clients, different initiatives. And I think there's just so many more opportunities now for people coming into the profession to help and support teams outside of their chosen practice area. So I think that's a really good sign as well.
Yeah, so interesting. And you mentioned about only having one career, and I think your story is absolutely phenomenal, the things that you've actually achieved in your career. So obviously we spoke a lot about, you know, the decision-making process when it came to, you know, what kind of rung true for you and kind of the life of a corporate lawyer to a certain extent. But I'd love to know, you know, you've kind of opened offices in the US, you've led really interesting teams as well. So I'm sure everyone would love to hear a little bit more about, you know, where you went from qualifying to then kind of leading up to being head of department, and the things that you've achieved as well.
Yeah, it's I'll try and condense it, because
Yeah.
it feels like in some respects it has been a long journey. But I mean, what was clear to me as I look back is that as I got more experienced and I took on more clients and I did more work, there became more of a need to try and create an identity. As one person in my career once said to me, a partner at a law firm, he said, you know, everybody in this firm really needs to have some sort of invisible label on their forehead, an identity within the firm where people say, oh yeah, James, he does that, or he's involved in this. And he said it's very important for people to have their own identity and to grow their own identity and not just be a generalist. And as I started to do more and more work, I started to think about sectors. I started to think about, I guess, my area, which my roots are venture capital and private equity. That's the department I qualified into at DLA. That's the area that I spent so much time with when I moved on to BLP, and gained my partnership there in 2007. And it was really at that point, I think, was a real turning point for me, where all of a sudden I was a partner, and actually a partner in a new firm. So it was, if you like, doubly challenging for me, because I'd sort of moved to a new firm and been promoted to partner. And I realized that the role was very different. And, I'd spent so many years working on transactions, finding those clauses at 2 a.m. for documents for clients. And all of a sudden I was almost becoming a headmaster, or playing a sort of supervisory role. And I remember on my first day, people were being, you're not going to be drafting documents anymore. And I just hadn't really thought about that, but it was a real eye-opener for me about the role that I was suddenly going to play as a partner in helping to develop junior people, looking at, being ultimately responsible for the work that they produce, but not doing all that sort of heavy lifting work, if you like. And also, as the years leading up to partnership, in understanding the role one plays in business development. And I think within corporate, it's very, very important that juniors at an early stage understand the importance of business development and winning clients, and what that messaging and label is when you go out and you're in a room full of, say, 100 people, and you're trying to gain the respect of those people, and to get business cards and hopefully get work out of them. So there's that kind of move as you get more senior. What I felt, certainly in my role, is that there's been more responsibility and more onus on being able to win new clients and perform a role in terms of growing teams, growing the department. And was lucky enough to have an opportunity to go out to California on a particular client request, I suppose, which was a very large acquisition back in 2012. And that just really developed for me. I went out and I did a pitch out in California. I had no plans to go there regularly or to build anything out there. It was just, I'd met the client in London, and they wanted me to go and meet the rest of their board. And it was actually at that meeting they said, look, you've won the deal. We'd like to use you for this acquisition, but we'd like to see you here quarterly. Will you make that commitment? Because we're looking at other deals, and that's the way we do business in California. Anyway, I made that commitment. I just won quite a large deal, went out every quarter in 2012 and did the same in 13 and 14, and ended up opening a San Francisco office for my previous firm, and ended up out there every month for about 4 years, growing that office to sort of half a dozen people, and all UK law. And of course, all my time out there was all business development. I mean, the whole purpose of it was that winning work and winning new US clients doing UK work, if you like. All that work was then shipped to the UK offices to actually carry out that work. So I was spending a third of my life in a pure business development role. Those 10 days a month were just pure business development. And it's a very, very different role, I suppose, is the point. Very, very different from the role that I might have carried out when I was a junior, just being told to process documents. So, the role has changed a lot for me. I think the other thing I just mentioned for people listening is types of clients. I think that's a big change, has been a big change for me. I started off my career working for very, very sophisticated clients, large PE houses, VC, institutional work at DLA. And those clients pretty much didn't need any real advice from me. Not that I would have been able to give it at that point in my career, but it was very much being told what to do by the client and just doing it. And as I've got more, I suppose, experienced over the years, you kind of want to give something back, and it's great having those sophisticated, large clients. But I've spent a lot of time working in the early stage, sort of startup world within tech, which I feel is very important as well, looking at the sector, not to disregard or ignore what is a large part of our client base, which is early stage businesses needing help and support and mentoring to grow. And to be involved with those clients on the small deals, and I still get that buzz from the small deals as well as the large deals, is being able to help them make introductions, help them find investors, introduce them to larger corporates, and generally help them grow. And I do that both here in the UK and with my network and my connections out in the Bay Area, but also as well increasingly on the East Coast, is actually helping these clients outside of the legal work, is actually helping them to scale up and grow, internationalize, go into new markets, find them new clients themselves, customers, suppliers, distributors, joint venture partners, whoever it might be, to help them and their business. And that's the part of, I suppose, looking at what I do now, that's the part of my practice now that I probably enjoy the most. Okay. Because it's very different from just processing. It's actually helping clients in a different way. So the business development has been, and the support and the mentoring to businesses is perhaps what I enjoy the most. But definitely different parts, different responsibilities. Yes, I'm sort of running the London corporate team as I did at my previous firm. That's great to be able to bring on juniors. We have lots of people coming in doing work experience. We have people coming in, as paralegals, people that want to really further their career. But I'll always go back to what I learned in those early days, which is, when these people join or show an interest in joining, it's let me sit down with you for half an hour and explain to you what an M&A deal is, how does a management buyout work? Yeah. And just so people can really make that decision at an early stage, whether they think they like the type of work, because some people may decide, actually, we've read this or we've looked at some of your deals and we don't think this is for us. And that's okay. People do have a change. We've had people in the last year who've come in from great firms and they've decided they want to be in-house, or they want to be even a commercial lawyer. We had one person who joined who decided that actually they wanted quite junior, that they went on to comment, and which happens a lot actually in the legal profession, went on to comment and decided actually they wanted to be a commercial lawyer. Yeah. So, these things happen too.
It's just fascinating, like hearing your story. And one thing that I felt as a junior member of the team, and having worked with thousands of juniors over the last 5 kind of 6 years, that they look at people like yourself who've achieved amazing things in their career, and they kind of like don't see it within themselves, whether it's saying things like, oh, I don't really know how to do business development, or, oh, I don't know if I could balance that, the commute must have been interesting, and kind of balancing family life with, opening up kind of new office and supporting clients in that way. And I think it's easy to get into the kind of mindset that, you're superhuman, which I'm sure you are to an extent, but also, it must come with its own challenges. And I just wondered if you would be happy to maybe share some of the things that maybe are challenging as a partner, whether it's, not having, been officially trained in that way, and, having done the kind of being really good at the kind of being a lawyer, and then, as you said, being made up, and then finding yourself doing a slightly different role, or balancing the workload, or whatever it would be. But I'm sure people would love to hear if there are things that you do kind of think, yeah, I need to make a conscious effort to balance this, or whatever that might be.
Yeah, it definitely comes with its challenges. Everyone not everybody, but a large proportion of people who go into the legal profession have a desire to become a partner. I think that is, if you like, the ultimate aim or goal for a lot of people, that they see it as a way of obviously it's a success, and to earn more money, and don't necessarily really understand what being a partner is all about. And it does have its challenges because um, people have their own expectations within the team. If I look at my team, my current team in London, they all have a desire to go through the ranks, if you like, to progress and have an easy way to progress. And there is challenges on all the partners in the team to ensure that these people grow their profile in the right way that gives them the best possible chance. I think the biggest challenge thinking about it is not to let anybody down in the team. You never want to let anybody down. And I think there's always that constant pressure to ensure that the people within your team are doing the right types of work, have the right level of profile. I always think that's a big thing that people don't think about. They think that if they just kind of do their time, work hard, that they'll automatically get partnership or they'll automatically go through the ranks. And it doesn't quite work like that. And I think that this word profile is so important, the internal profile, working with the right people within the group, around offices. If you're at a national firm, it's very, very important to grow your profile. And I think there is an onus and a responsibility on people in the team to ensure that people can progress, whether they are paralegals that we have paralegals in the team at the moment that are constantly asking about their own progression. They want to qualify, they want to do exams, they want to become permanent fixtures in the team. They are looking perhaps a bit more long term. Then you have the juniors that are concentrating on how just to get to that next level, and how do they meet those parameters at the moment in terms of the thresholds for getting there. And there is a lot of a lot of pressure, if you like, on ensuring that those people remain happy and have the access to the work and the people to be able to prove themselves to actually get to that level. And so I think we're constantly looking at that. We're constantly trying to develop. And I think one of the other challenges actually, which I suppose I personally find is this work allocation point. We've been phenomenally busy over the last 6 months, as a lot of corporate teams have been across many firms, both in London and nationally. And it's important to make sure that the work is going into the right hands, if you like, and that people all get a fair opportunity and chance to work on different types of work. So we continue to work on that, and we continue to improve. I think that is a real responsibility on the partners to ensure that people do progress. And that's probably the number one thing for me, is to ensure that the team are happy, that they feel like they are all working towards a common goal. We all have targets. Everybody has targets. Everybody's working to those targets, and people are having some fun at the same time. We are a very, very social team. I can talk about my team because we are very social. We go running at least once a week as a team. We're not quite so much in this point, but although we did last week, we do try and go out a lot. We've had daily calls every day for the last 6 months, just sort of to be together for those who are not in the office, that are working from home. So sort of morale, well-being, very, very important, and constantly just trying to evolve and be innovative and bring people on and to try and teach that business development to the team.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure many people will find that really interesting, that even partners, they do face things that it's difficult at times. I always round off the interview with a couple of questions. And the first thing I'd love to know is, what does resilience mean to you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think uh, I would probably say it from the perspective of the team again,
Mm,
and what I'm working as a team, because I think if you are trying to continue to work in the same way, and if we look at the circumstances that we're all facing at the moment, it is very much a team effort. So I would always view it that we're all kind of pushing or pulling in the same direction. And, whether that is trying to complete a deal, or we're going after a new client, or, we're trying to address the shortfall in our target in a particular month, whatever the challenge is, we will always look to do that as a group because we're stronger as a team. So that's the first thing I think of when you say resilience. It's always a team effort to try and achieve whatever we are trying to do, whatever the issue is. It may be a client problem. It may be a, dare I say it, not a complaint, but we've got a difficult client on the phone, or we need a bill to be paid that's been outstanding for a long period of time. And so that resilience comes in a lot of forms. And I think there is an expectation that everybody has a part to play in that, whether they are a junior, whether they're a trainee or a paralegal or a PA, or whether it's a partner or a senior associate, that we will all face that
yeah,
issue
yeah.
together and try and achieve it together.
And the thing I love most about that is that you, throughout the whole interview, have really acknowledged the junior members of the team and how important they are to that team. Because I do remember, sometimes feeling like, I'm not really playing a very valuable role. But I think no matter what role they are playing, it just gives people that confidence that they are vital. So thanks for kind of, talking in that way and sharing that. I'm sure many people find that really interesting. The other thing I'd love to know is what would your, number one tip for sustainable success be in the legal industry? I'm really throwing them at you today. Sorry, I could have gave you a heads up, but
Yeah.
I'd go on their cuff.
Well, I suppose the key question, if I may, is when you say sustainable, do you mean just sort of ongoing success? Is that your point?
Yeah, I think just helping people make it possible to do long term and really kind of achieve their goals long term as well.
Um, I think part of it is being happy. I think part of it is understanding the role. I think part of it is going through objectives with people, as we tend to do. We always have debriefs. We try to have debriefs. It's been a bit difficult recently, but at the end of every transaction, I think a transactional debrief is very important for people to have understood their roles on the transaction, and to also offer up what they feel went wrong, and how it could have been done differently. I go back to some of your other questions to say that the reason why I talk about juniors perhaps a lot is because it's very important for us to understand and acknowledge that anybody in the team, however junior or however senior, can always have a fantastic idea.
Mm,
And that we have juniors often saying, look, let's allocate work differently. Let's have our team meetings differently. Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? Can we lead an objective on whatever it might be? And that is really, really important to us as a team. I just don't think, going back to resilience, I don't think you can be a resilient team unless you take on board the views of everybody.
yeah.
And I think if everybody has a place in the team and understands how they can actually add value, and for me in the tech sector, this is, I suppose, another example of it really. We have nearly 2,000 people and 13 offices. There's a lot of people involved in the technology sector. It may be people in the employment team or the commercial team or whoever across those offices. But the best ideas that have come out about what we should do from a strategy perspective have come from the junior members. It hasn't come from the partners. I was asked to form a tech executive committee, which I did, but I've actually formed an associate, like non-partner committee as well, because some of the fantastic ideas coming through are from the juniors, because they're almost closer to some of the opportunities than the partners who are very busy. So I think if you can give people a place and they can see that their ideas are being listened to and they have a great role on transactions and understand it, I think you're quite a long way there to giving people the level of job satisfaction that they need to see themselves in your team for the long term. And that's what I very much hope when I look at my team in London, that they all feel that they all have a clearly defined role to play, but they're also all feeding in to initiatives. They're all running their own initiatives. We have paralegals and junior people running a whole load of initiatives in London because they want to and because they're capable of doing so. And I think that goes a long way to job satisfaction. So I think going to sustainability and to sort of ensure you're getting, if you like, the best out of people, you need to keep them happy. You need to be firstly paying them well, but you also need to be giving them opportunities to go through the ranks. So, yeah.
Amazing. So interesting. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today. I'm sure so many people will really love hearing, about your journey and that little insight into, making those decisions, that tough decisions when it comes to qualification as well. And also how much you value the juniors within your team. I think it's going to make a lot of people feel a lot more confident to actually kind of speak out and ask or say if they have an idea. So thank you for taking the time to speak to me today.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks. And for everyone that is listening today, I really wanted to say, follow us on LinkedIn at Leading Minds, and you will get kind of the weekly episodes of the podcast. And also maybe go onto our website, leadingmindsglobal.com/podcast, and subscribe for our weekly newsletter, and you'll be first to have it dropped into your inbox. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me, and I'll speak to you soon.